time for Dr. J.
I just want your reaction.
That is what you'll get.
Are you ready?
I am.
All right, this is from the New Statesman, September 22nd, 2020. New Statesman is a British left-leaning.
I know what it is.
Yeah, left-leaning journal. Well,
September what?
I'm letting them know. September 22nd.
Oh, so my birthday.
Your birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I don't like this at all.
Judith Butler on the Culture Wars. J.K. Rowling and living in anti-intellectual times.
I knew it was Butler. You mother... I knew it. Okay, so what follows is going to be complete bullshit. I don't have to hear it. You know what? Don't even read it. Let's just talk about Judith Butler for the next 45 minutes.
All right. This is the. I'm just going to go through her questions and responses. So this is the lady. Okay, so first of all, we have to. I'm going to do something that I'm sure you're going to respect a lot. I'm actually going to honor Judith Butler and her philosophy. Okay. So one of Butler's core tenets is that the individual should not be constrained by social constructs.
I agree with that.
Yes.
This is one of the reasons I can't disrespect her.
So, I will be referring to her as it, because I do not choose to recognize what she wants to be, because she is proposing a social construct onto me by choosing, and I quote,
I'll say her for the both of us.
by she or they as her preferred pronouns. I wouldn't have done this.
Oh, go ahead.
I wouldn't have done this if they hadn't added that to the article. That's just me being mean.
Typical.
So, I'll be referring to the Judith Butler as it.
So I've read a lot of Judith Butler, so this should be entertaining.
First question. The interviewer's name is Alona Ferber.
What a great name.
It's very British.
Alona?
Alona Ferber.
How do you spell Alona?
A-L-O-N-A. I guess Alana?
Oh, who the hell knows? There'd be two N's for Alana, I think.
Yeah, Alona. Alona Ferber. Ferber.
That is very British.
So she asks, in Gender Trouble, you wrote that contemporary feminist debates over the meanings of gender lead time and again to certain sense of trouble, as if the indeterminacy of gender might eventually culminate in the failure of feminism. How far do ideas you explored in that book 30 years ago help explain how the trans rights debate has moved into mainstream culture and politics?
An excellent question.
Excellent question.
And that book, and I've not read it all, but that book is an achievement. I'll say that much. She has got one hell of a mind.
It responds. I want to first question whether trans exclusionary feminists are really the same as mainstream feminists. If you are right to identify the one with the other, then a feminist position opposing transphobia is a marginal position. I think this may be wrong. My wager is that most feminists support trans rights and oppose all forms of transphobia. So I find it worrisome that suddenly the trans exclusionary radical feminist position is understood as commonly accepted or even mainstream. I think it is actually a fringe movement that is seeking to speak in the name of the mainstream, and that our responsibility is to refuse to let that happen. I want to talk about the movement that she points to, the trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Is there blood coming out of my ear? Because I think my brain is melting. Trans exclusionary.
Radical feminist.
By trans exclusionary, we mean a feminism that does not embrace,
A radical feminism
that does not embrace trans
Uh-huh.
people. That's the claim she's making?
She's making that.
Read her answer one more
All
time.
right. My wager is that most feminists support trans rights and oppose all forms of transphobia, so I find it worrisome that suddenly the trans exclusionary radical feminist position is understood as commonly accepted or even mainstream.
So she's saying it's not. That
Yeah.
this is a myth. That feminism tends to embrace trans people.
Right.
I wouldn't argue with that.
They're talking about Rowling.
Yeah, well, I would probably say that she's making a claim that most feminists would embrace it anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think that in itself is all that controversial. I think she's probably right about that. But this whole thing is about J.K. Rowling.
That's what this interview leads to.
You may want to give some background on what Rowling said.
Rowling said that women who men who transition as women are not women.
Okay.
That's what she said. So she's speaking biologically.
Well, and that in itself is something that she challenges in Gender Trouble, that Butler challenges in Gender Trouble.
Yeah.
The idea of biological sex as a construct.
Yeah.
Does that mean, is blindness a construct? I'm not actually blind, I've just been told I am. I mean, you know, I don't know. I don't buy it. I mean, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yes.
But I like Butler. I do.
Okay. Ferber asks a follow-up. One example of mainstream public discourse on this issue in the UK is the argument about allowing people to self-identify in terms of their gender. In an open letter she published in June, J.K. Rowling articulated the concern that this would throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, potentially putting women at risk of violence. It's not really a question, but she just laid that out there. It responded. If we look closely at the example that you characterize as mainstream, we can see that a domain of fantasy is at work.
A domain of fantasy?
One which reflects more about the feminist who has such a fear that any actual existing situation in trans life. The feminist who holds such a view presumes that the penis does define the person, and that anyone with a penis would identify as a woman for the purposes of entering such changing rooms and posing a threat to the woman inside. It assumes that the penis is the threat, or that any person who has a penis who identifies as a woman is engaging in a base, deceitful, and harmful form of disguise. This is a rich fantasy, and one that comes from powerful fears, but it does not describe a social reality. Trans women are often discriminated against in men's bathrooms, and their modes of self-identification are ways of describing a lived reality, one that cannot be captured or regulated by the fantasies brought to bear upon them. The fact that such fantasies pass as public argument is itself cause for worry.
This is the bathroom bill all over again.
It is.
So again, I get what she's trying to say here.
Yes.
She's not wrong that this fear that somehow men are going to pose as trans women so they can rape women and children. It just doesn't happen that way.
I think what Rowling was trying to articulate is something that people have been trying to articulate but can't. In that there is legitimate cause for concern that not all trans people are actually trans.
Well, yeah, you're making the argument I think that Rowling is. I don't necessarily agree, but I see where she's going. This idea of the fear that someone is going to pose in order to rape.
Yeah. And so.
And the concern is this puts women at risk, including trans women. Okay.
Yeah, it puts anyone who is in the box of being caught off guard.
Yeah.
It puts them in danger. It doesn't matter if it's trans woman or a biological woman.
I guess the other question too,
I guess you would say cisnormal.
worth asking is it a common occurrence, or is it something that largely was stirred up by things like the bathroom bill?
Right.
Because, and you and I have said this before.
I got it.
You and I have said this before, that it was largely manufactured to create fear. Because
was.
nobody cared about this until
Right.
they were told they should.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand her concern, not Butler's.
Yeah.
I understand Rowling's concern. I think it's less of an issue than we probably think.
My problem with what it says, this little section right here, it assumes that the penis is the threat, or that any person who has a penis who identifies as a woman is engaging in a base, deceitful, and harmful form of disguise. This is a rich fantasy and one that comes from powerful fears, but does not describe a social reality.
I don't think that's what she's saying. What
No.
Rowling's saying that there are people who are not trans people who are going to pose as.
Yeah.
Not that trans people themselves are a threat,
Right.
though they have been regarded that way too.
And I think what it is missing is what we've talked about. This was not a threat until somebody pointed out that it could be.
Yeah, that's the beginning of the fantasy.
And what you need to do is, instead of addressing what Butler's doing, is engaging with her own rhetoric that she's infamous for,
Yes.
instead of addressing what Rowling addressed.
Well, because that's kind of the postmodernist turn in thought is rather than answering a question, you are instead, and this is my problem with it, you never actually answer the question. Instead, you critique the question.
Yeah.
Which is a very safe place to go. Because it means you don't necessarily have to be accountable for anything. And I have a problem with that. And as much as I love Derrida, he's the reason why Butler's doing this, because Derrida made that way of thinking possible. This is not Foucault. This is Derrida. Refusing to answer the question and talking about the inadequacy of the question. So yeah, I know what she's trying to say.
Yeah.
I just don't think she's doing it in a way that's necessarily helpful.
No.
Because that's not what Rowling is saying.
Right.
I don't agree with Rowling.
No, I don't either.
But Rowling
she missed what Rowling is actually.
She's saying,
again, what you and I have concluded, this was not a problem until somebody pointed out that it could be a problem.
Rowling is saying that straight men are going to pose as trans women to rape women.
You're going to have that problem.
Not trans women as being the problem.
Right. She's pointing to the fact that you're going to have nefarious straight men taking advantage of this.
Yeah.
And that is a real possibility.
Yeah. We'll see how it turns out. I don't. To date, I haven't heard of a case where that's been an issue yet.
I haven't either. At least it's not been in the national news, and that may be by design.
But Butler misses the point. Now, is she wrong in that there's a strong element in this country and elsewhere that is transphobic? Yes.
Yeah.
There are people who challenge the idea and say you can't do that, and what's wrong with you, and you must be a freak, or some other nonsense. But that's not what Rowling is saying.
No.
That's entirely different. She misses the point entirely. That's
All right.
surprising.
The consensus. This is from. What did I say her name was? Ferber. So Ferber asks, the consensus among progressives seems to be that feminists who are on J.K. Rowling's side of the argument are on the wrong side of history. Is this fair, or is there any merit in their arguments? It responds, let us be clear that the debate here is not between feminists and trans activists. There are trans affirmative feminists, and many trans people are also committed feminists. So one clear problem is the framing that acts as if the debate is between feminists and trans people. It is not. One reason to militate, what a great word. Militate.
She's really good
She is.
at words.
I
man.
was being facetious.
I love that word though, because it's so weird.
One reason to militate against this framing is because trans activism is linked to queer activism and to feminist legacies that remain very alive today. Feminism has always been committed to the proposition that the social meanings of what it is to be a man or woman are not yet settled. We tell histories about what it meant to be a woman at a certain time and place. We track transformation of those categories over time. We depend on gender as a historical category, and that means we do not yet know all the ways it may come to signify, and we are open to new understandings of its social meanings. It would be a disaster for feminism to return either to a strictly biological understanding of gender or to reduce social conduct to a body part or to impose fearful fantasies, their own anxieties, on trans women. Their abiding and very real sense of gender ought to be recognized socially and publicly as a relative simple matter of according another human dignity. The trans-exclusionary radical feminist position attacks the dignity of trans people. Trans-exclusionary radical feminist. I swear to God.
She's big on the terms. I told you the term that I like the most because it was, masculinist signifying economies, and I know what she means when she says it, but I don't know how helpful it is. She's guilty of every single post-structuralist crime you can think of in terms of the way she uses language. And again, who's to blame? God love him. Derrida, or as you say, Derrida.
Derrida and Foucault. Good old Mikey.
Again, I know where she's going.
I want to read the second part of this answer again. We depend on gender as a historical category. And that means we do not yet know all the ways it may come to signify. And we are open to new understandings of its social meanings. It would be a disaster for feminism to return either to a strictly biological understanding of gender or to reduce social conduct to a body part or to impose fearful fantasies, their own anxieties, on trans women. My question is, because she doesn't explain why it would be a disaster. She just says it would be a disaster for feminism.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, that's the problem here, is that she leaves it open for interpretation, and good criticism and good theory doesn't leave itself open like that.
No,
it has to answer questions, and she refuses to answer questions.
The problem.
You picked a real wow. Okay.
A good one. Oh yeah. Oh, I know. I knew I'd get a good conversation out of this one.
Well, because I'm not angry. There are things she does I don't like.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what she says.
I don't like anything she does.
I know you don't. I'm fascinated with it.
Here's my problem. Here's my problem with this whole argument. She starts off by saying, we depend on gender as a historical category. Okay? With that half a sentence, she recognizes gender is based on this historical understanding of male and female.
Yes.
Which is the point of calling it feminism. Because the term feminism comes from the word feminine, which refers to women.
Yes.
So then when we come down here and she says it will be a disaster for feminism to return either to a strictly biological understanding of gender. Wait a minute. You're already doing that by calling it feminism.
I'm surprised they haven't found a better name for it to kind of eradicate that contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can make the claim they have by talking about queer theory and gender theory rather than saying feminism.
But she has said feminism in just the two responses I've said at least 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
She's even created this wonderful trans-exclusionary radical feminist.
Oh, she loves those. She loves those terms. Because she strings together 4 or 5 words and but what we told one of our former students, this is about, what you discover when you spend a lot of time with theory is that the emperor is naked. Mm-hmm. And that she's not necessarily saying anything new. That better be on.
It is.
Okay.
Don't worry, we've got sound.
Okay.
Whether that's recording or not, we've always got sound.
So yeah, again, and I feel like I have to say this every time I read a post-structuralist, I know what she's trying to say. I think there's another way to say it. I really do, and it is deliberately obscurantist, and that's an issue for me because it makes for bad theory.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I get it, and I understand the concept of not allowing yourself to be defined by your biological sex. I'm all for that. That's fine. But that's the same. That creates the dichotomy of gender and sex, which I don't think anyone argues with anymore.
Yeah.
But in Gender Trouble, if I'm not mistaken, she even challenges the idea of biological sex.
Yeah.
And that's where we get into trouble.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Next question. Or statement, or whatever Ferber does.
Yeah, no, not a lot of. In Gender, Ferber asks, there's actual question mark at the end. In Gender Trouble, you ask whether by seeking to represent a particular idea of women, feminists participate in the same dynamics of oppression and heteronormativity that they are trying to shift. In light of bitter arguments playing out within feminism now, does the same still apply? So in other words, in Girl Trouble, she argues that feminists were participating in the exact same structure of oppression that heteronormativity was applying to them. And she's asking, does it still apply now? It responds, as I remember the argument in Gender Trouble, written more than 30 years ago. I could just hear her saying that. Sorry, I could hear it just saying that. The point was rather different. First, one does not have to be a woman to be a feminist. And we should not confuse the categories. So she's addressing the problem I had
Earlier.
Yeah. I still have a problem with it. Men who are feminists, non-binary, and trans people who are feminists are part of the movement if they hold to the basic propositions of freedom and equality that are part of any feminist political struggle. When laws and social policies represent women, they make tacit decisions about who counts as a woman, and very often make presuppositions about what a woman is. We have seen this in the domain of reproductive rights. So the question I was asking then is, do we need to have a settled idea of women or of any gender in order to advance feminist goals?
Read the last sentence again.
This is where, okay.
It'll take you about half an hour to get through it. But
we have seen this in the domain of reproductive rights. So the question I was asking then is, do we need to have a settled idea of women or of any gender in order to advance feminist goals?
And the implied answer for her is no.
Right.
Right, okay.
I don't know. Let me take that back. I don't know what her implied answer is, because the thing is, in the upper part of this response, what she's arguing is that laws and social policies representing women determine who counts as a woman.
By definition, by definition of expanding those rights to women, you're defining what women are. Mm-hmm. That I get. Okay, so far okay.
Well, I understand it. I don't agree with it.
Why not? Just curious. I think I know why, but I'm... Oh dear.
Okay, we'll just do... This is a key fob.
It's quite true. I can't argue with that.
Well, you can. Because according to your buddy, Derda,
He would still use it as a key fob, though.
he would still use the object as a key fob.
Buddy.
Your buddy, Darren. What's the function of the key fob? To open my car door.
Yes.
That is the function of my key fob.
Yes.
Okay. There are regulations on this key fob. I mean, you roll it over and there's all kinds of information on the back here. If you go and you crack this thing open, there is, there's a little writing right here on the top that you can barely see and read. Talking about, I'm sure if I could actually see it and read it, talking about all the compliances that it meets under the FCC, because it is radio.
Yeah.
Radio, the FCC has to regulate this, okay? So when we talk about the key fob, that falls under the definitions of the FCC and all the things that regulate this key fob that work with my car, it's not the key fob, it's the object that falls under that.
Yes.
So when we talk about, she immediately goes to reproductive rights. Okay, fine. Let's talk about something else that only women have to worry about. Menstrual cycles. There are certain feminine products that are dangerous for women, and they have to be regulated. No man is going to stick a tampon up his pee hole. It's not built for that. So you are creating feminine products for women who have menstrual cycles. We're not defining who the women are. We're defining the product. That's why I have a problem with her. Social policies like that, these quote-unquote social policies, when we talk about reproductive rights, okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about women who choose to biologically create a child.
Or terminate.
Not a trans. Trans don't fit into that category, not because we're elitists trying to cut trans out, but because that's not something they deal with.
Well, and I would say
we're not cutting men out of it either, because men don't ovulate.
Well, and I would say too that it works just as well for something like disability.
Yeah.
I don't need a ramp in a building.
No.
It wasn't made for me. It's made for someone who has certain physical limitations who requires it.
Yes, and we categorize that as blind.
Yeah.
Okay.
As well, in this case, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's when we talk about, okay, we need disabilities specifically for this one group over here.
Accessibility.
Accessibility. Sorry, we don't need disability.
We need more disabilities.
We need to hurt them more.
Jay, your disability is not good enough. You need one more.
You got ratcheted up, buddy.
Work harder.
Yeah, work harder. Let's try harder.
So no,
but we say, when we look at that, we understand it's for a blind person. We're not being any kind of, this goes back to this idea of the minute you other something, you're hurting it. That's not necessarily always true.
No.
And in this case, when you talk about, as she points out, laws and social policies that represent women, we're categorizing women. No, we're not. We're addressing a specific group that has been othered by society through some kind of something happened.
Well, and the other thing is that rather than questioning the idea of regulating the way women are treated, instead you could say we need to continue to expand rights to include people like trans people, rather than asking questions about what womanhood is in terms of sex. I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I understand where she's going with it, but
I do too.
But I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure I agree. I agree with some of it.
I don't agree with any of it.
I know. This is why I can't throw her away completely, though, because once in a while she'll say something like, "Yeah," and then she'll follow it up and like, "No."
And that's why I like you say, "Oh, Jason."
I mean, no. No. I'm still reeling over the idea of the fantasy and of trans women being dangerous, but that's not what Rawling was talking
That's not
about.
what she's saying.
So, yeah, okay. This is a good interview. And this is Judith Butler in a nutshell for anyone who's never read her before.
Yeah,
You
you're
can-
getting the full-blown.
Yeah, this is a nice simplified version rather than having to read her books,
Yeah.
which they border on the unreadable. And I have advanced degrees in English. If they're unreadable
That's
to me,
an understatement.
have you read her?
The only one, yeah, I've read a few things. I've never read a book, but I've read articles. The what was the other one that you said the other day? It's Slavic, Spivak.
Spivak.
Yeah,
Spivak's
Spivak's worse.
Spivak got Derrida into their bones because Spivak's the one who translated of grammatology. So I think that's why Spivak sounds the way Spivak does.
Right.
And I keep saying Spivak because I'm not sure if Spivak is a man or a woman. And I don't want to make any assumptions because I'm not sure. I really don't know. What's wrong?
Just making sure everything's kosher.
So,
All right.
am I answering the way you thought I would?
We're getting a good discussion.
That's the goal.
I didn't know how you were going to react. I just knew you were going to be.
You knew I was going to talk.
Yeah.
I have a lot to say about Butler.
I do too.
Yeah, none of it's good for you.
No.
No. Mine is mixed.
No, I think Miss Butler needs to be kicked out of the canon.
Miss Butler.
It.
Dr. Butler.
It. Ferber. You weren't a signatory to the open letter on cancel culture in Harper's this summer, but did its arguments resonate with you? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, this is the article that came out in Harper's where a bunch of people signed off, including Rowling, which pissed a bunch of people off, talking about we need open discourse.
And Butler was one who signed it.
Butler did not sign it.
Oh, she didn't sign it.
Rowling did. So, Ferber starts off by, you weren't a signatory to the open letter,
Weren't, okay.
but did its arguments resonate with you? In other words, the arguments of free speech and open debate. It responds.
Oh God, am I going to be upset by this?
I have mixed feelings about that letter. On the one hand, I am an educator and writer and believe in slow and thoughtful debate. Good for you.
So,
I learned from being confronted and challenged. And I accept that I have made some significant errors in my public life. Well done, it.
no kidding.
If someone then said I should not be read or listened to as a result of those errors, well, I would object internally, since I don't think any mistakes a person made can or should summarize that person. We live in time, we err, sometimes seriously, and if we are lucky, we change precisely because of interactions that let us see things differently.
Well said.
On the other hand,
Okay.
some of those signatories were taking aim at Black Lives Matter, as if the loud and public opposition to racism were itself uncivilized behavior. Some of them have opposed legal rights for Palestine. Others have allegedly committed sexual harassment. And yet others do not wish to be challenged on their racism. Democracy requires a good challenge. It does not always arrive in soft tones. So I am not in favor of neutralizing the strong political demands for justice on the part of subjugated people when one has not been heard for decades. The cry for justice is bound to be loud.
Okay. So the first half was fantastic. Parts of the second half were good.
Parts?
Parts were good.
No.
But I think she misses the boat by assuming that when we talk about cancel culture, we're talking about Black Lives Matter at the same time. Because cancel culture is bigger than a single movement.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you can't narrow it down to Black Lives Matter. That's not fair. Because there are those involved with the Black Lives Matter movement who are not into cancel culture, who are looking for an honest debate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it unintentionally waters down what's going on here.
Yeah.
That's my problem. Because we have cancel culture in all aspects of life. It's not that simple.
So you want to hear my problem with the entire second paragraph? She does exactly what she said she would not do in the first paragraph. Yeah, there are people on that letter that oppose legal rights for Palestine. Did you mention why? Did you explain what their argument was? Or is it just because they oppose Palestine, you immediately shut them off? Because up in the first paragraph, you said, I accept and have made some significant errors in my public life and believe in slow and thoughtful debate. Well, debate means that you understand the other side so you can engage with the other side and argue with it. You don't dismiss it. She's doing the exact opposite in the second paragraph.
Dismissing the signatories.
Dismissing it. Because they have been known to do specific things.
Is she referring to specific signatories on the letter?
Yeah.
Okay. She never gives examples.
No.
But she may not want to for fear of calling somebody out by name.
Taking aim at Black Lives Matter as if the loud and public opposition to racism were itself uncivilized behavior. We're not talking about the loud and public opposition to racism. We're talking about the fact that people were going on and saying, okay, yes, we need to talk about police brutality. We also need to talk about black-on-black crime in urban areas. No, you're canceled, racist. We're going to focus on the police. That's what was happening. If Judith Butler, if it is the champion of free thought and expression that she wants you to believe in this first paragraph, then she would be opposed to them canceling the person who's saying there's other problems we also need to talk about.
Yeah.
But she does the exact same thing that everybody else on that bandwagon does. The same thing Kendi does.
Shut you down.
She shuts them down. Sorry, but that is not debate.
No.
As a wonderful philosopher, Southern philosopher would say, I don't care who you are. That ain't debate.
Who's the Southern philosopher?
Oh God, what is his name? That's funny right there. Who is that?
Larry the Cable Guy?
Yeah!
I should have known.
Yeah. Larry the Cable Guy. I think I turned it a little bit. We'll go back there.
That's an interesting character right there.
Yes, it is. Right there. Yes, sir. Yes, he was that's interesting right there.
Wonder what his real accent is.
I don't know. Oh, it's not that thick.
No.
I've heard real interviews with him. He's not that thick.
Smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I see your concerns. I get it.
I see your concerns, and I raised them. One Michael Foucault.
Actually, it's Mikey.
Mikey
among his friends. Although there's a lot of Foucault I really do like. I like Discipline and Punish a lot.
Well, I think, and I argued this in one of the podcasts. I argued when it comes to power dynamic, the idea that a larger body creates a power structure. This is true when you look at ethics, because ethically we do this. We do this all the time with ethics and morals.
But what makes him also right is that before Foucault, we believed that you could find those in power and say that's where power is.
Yeah.
But Foucault says power is disseminated, and so you can never quite cut it off.
Yeah.
It's like playing whack-a-mole, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you hit the mole in one hole, another one pops up.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with power with Foucault, is that you can never really challenge it. It's very pessimistic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think he might also be right about that.
Maybe.
The hegemon.
Ferber
Okay.
says, this year you published The Force of Nonviolence. Does the idea of radical equality, which you discuss in the book, have any relevance for the feminist movement? Radical equality.
I think Butler likes the word radical.
So let's So let's see what it says. It responds. My point in the recent book is to suggest that we rethink equality in terms of interdependency. That's a big word.
It's a very eco criticism word.
It is. We tend to say that one person should be treated the same as another. And we measure whether or not equality has been achieved by comparing individual cases. But what if the individual and individualism is part of the problem? It makes a difference to understand ourselves as living in a world in which we are fundamentally dependent on others, on institutions, on the earth, and to see that this life depends on a sustaining organization for various forms of life. If no one escapes that interdependency, then we are equal in a different sense. We are equally dependent, that is, equally social and ecological. And that means we cease to understand ourselves only as demarcated individuals. If trans exclusionary radical feminists understood themselves as sharing a world with trans people in a common struggle for equality, freedom from violence, and for social recognition, there would be no more trans exclusionary radical feminists. But feminism would surely survive as a coalitional practice and vision of solidarity.
All right, I understood every word she said. I did, and I know what she's doing.
Okay.
I can actually say I know what she's doing, and I think she contradicts herself with one of the answers before. But all she's doing is taking ecology and applying it to other things. That everything is connected to everything else. That becomes hard to argue with on a biological level.
Yes, it does.
Rather than focusing on the needs and rights of your own group, focus on the needs and rights of all groups and admit that you are all connected in some significant way.
Yes.
I'm okay with that. That makes sense. That part makes sense. That's probably the most sensible thing she said in the interview so far. That's because all the other stuff, she finds a way to say something good and then undermines it by saying something that doesn't make sense. This time, she sounds like she's making some sense. You disagree.
I do.
I knew you would.
I'm going to tell you why I disagree, and I'm going to tell you why you agree with it. I know exactly why you agree with it.
Well, because I'm an eco-critic.
Well,
That's why
also, it's because it's Marxist.
Yes.
This whole answer is a Marxist answer.
Well, Marxist and eco-criticism, yeah.
Yeah. Which derives from Marxism. The idea. I mean, do I think we are all the same? Yes. Do I think that we are all connected? Yes. Here's my thing, though. I don't agree with dismissing individualism.
Oh, no, and I agree with that too.
But that's what she's doing.
Well, that's not eco-criticism, what she's doing there. What she's doing is she's taking...
That's purely
Foucault.
Marxist.
Well, it's also Foucault.
Yeah, but it's pure Marxism.
Well, I don't know that Marx actually would ever advocate for the idea that there's no such thing as the individual.
Yeah.
I get the impression he was actually okay with the individual.
Well, looking at the basic idea, the basic science of sociology, of socialism. I mean, not sociology, but socialism. Everybody's equal. Well, if everybody's equal, there's no individual, right? One of the most incredible cartoons I ever saw in my life was an argument for capitalism and against socialism. And they did it, and they did a hell of a job with it. They did it on Fairly Odd Parents, where Timmy Turner wishes that everyone was the same. So his wish comes true. And everyone is a little gray blob. And all these little gray blobs are running around. They get equal treatment. They get equal everything. Nobody's the same. The problem is, you can't tell who's who.
So
because hold on, let me finish. So it strips away the individual. This is the problem I have with this whole thing, and then I'll let you weigh in. And I've told you this before, and I tell my students this, I've told my children this. Every single person on this planet experiences life completely differently from somebody else. No one is going to experience life the way you have.
Exactly.
In the actions you have, the experiences you've had. You and I could experience the same thing at the same time and have two completely different experiences of it. Based on the experiences that have come before us that we have lived through. And we all are going to see and understand the world in different, completely different ways. Because of that, that creates diversity. That in itself creates diversity.
Yes.
Naturally.
Yes.
So in nature, you don't have sameness. You have diversity. What connects us is we are all going towards a common goal.
Yes.
And the common goal is life.
And I think that's also Marxism. So what we have to be careful of here is equating sameness and equality. Sameness is very dangerous. And Marx would probably be horrified by the idea of sameness.
Yeah.
But equal rights is what Marx would advocate for. Equality in terms of basic income, equality in terms of education, or the potential for education, equality in terms of something like healthcare.
The argument I've always made, the same starting line.
That's exactly what Marx.
Give everybody the same starting line.
Yes.
Where they end up is up to them.
Yes.
And you cannot fault them if one person goes further than another.
No.
Because
Well,
their experiences led them to a different place.
I don't care where they end up so long as they've got equal rights along the way. So long as they're not turned away from something like healthcare. So long as they're not controlled by the bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
So long as their labor is valued. So that's where I would object with the idea of sameness and equality. I don't think they're the same thing. I think they are radically different.
Yeah.
Under true Marxism.
Yeah.
Watered down Marxism
Or postmodern.
or
Marxism.
postmodernism, yeah. And this is where I part ways with a lot of post-structuralism. I believe the individual exists. I don't like the attack on the individual subject. That's what Foucault would call it. I do not like the attack on the individual subject.
Yeah.
We are defined. I mean, even if, and I've made this argument before. Okay, even if you're not an individual when you come out of the womb.
No.
You're just a thing.
No.
But you accrue experience.
Yes.
You are affected by different pop culture artifacts in a certain combination that makes you you. And I think that's something they miss out on.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Foucault's argument was that in the postmodern, and this is what Jameson talks about, the hive creates the individual. And so it's the Dr. Pepper commercial.
Yes.
Right? She wants to be an individual. She puts on the Dr. Pepper t-shirt. She is the individual. She walks outside, and there's 1,000 people with Dr. Pepper shirts on.
Yes.
And it's an ironic statement
Yes.
that flips itself on the head.
Yes.
That she's not an individual. She's actually part of another group.
So my focus on go ahead.
But what you were pointing out, what they miss is, yes, we are informed by all these experiences. That's what makes us unique.
Yes.
And I don't like the word special, because special, again, like I've told you before, the term special puts you above. When you're unique, you're on the same plane as everybody else. You just stand out in a different way.
You're different.
Yeah.
You're not better, not worse, different. So what I like about her answer isn't the individual part. That makes me exceedingly nervous. It's the interconnectedness of all people.
Right.
That I love. And because we're interconnected, we are our brother's keeper.
Yeah.
If we are truly interconnected,
okay,
then,
you're coming from a Christian standpoint. I get it now.
Well, I am.
I see it now.
If we are truly interconnected, then we are responsible for our fellow human beings, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
And therefore, they should have the same rights that everybody else has. Because when they suffer, we suffer.
Yes.
So yes, Christianity.
Well done. Well done for taking its argument and converting it to Catholicism.
I don't know that she would be very happy with that.
Oh, she wouldn't be.
Well, she might be okay with the Episcopal thing.
I said she, didn't I? I am very sorry, Miss Butler. It.
Dr. Butler. You're killing her here.
Like she's ever going to see this.
No. I think we should send her an advance copy.
All right.
She might reply.
Maybe. All right. Last question. I mean, it's not the last question in the article. Last question we're going to cover. Ferber asks, you have spoken about the backlash against gender ideology and wrote an essay for the New Statesman in 2019. Do you see any connection between this and contemporary debates about trans rights? Gender ideology. It responds, "It is painful to see that Trump's position that genders should be defined by biological sex," and I will stop there because the rest of the answer is bullshit. Because she immediately said, "It is painful to see that Trump's position." That is what I still have not read this answer fully. I've read this article a few times now, preparing for this day.
But this answer, you won't finish reading.
I won't finish it because it is painful to see that Trump's position. I did that on purpose because it's actually the next to last question. This next to last question exposes what this whole interview is about.
It's about Trump.
It's about Trump. They mask it under a thing with rolling. And by adding Trump on the end, they're connecting him to Rolling. They're making Rolling his partner. This whole thing is a rhetorical exercise to demonize two people by connecting one with the other.
Well, I'm okay with looking at one in particular as being a horrible human being. And I think you are too. I mean...
Well, no, I'm starting to believe he's just an old man who's stuck in his ways, who got stuck in a job he didn't want to do, and he doesn't communicate well at all.
Well, and he's a brat.
He is a brat.
He's a brat. And
he throws temper tantrums.
He is not a statesman, and that is my problem with him. Not the fact that I find his views reprehensible.
Right.
But he's a child.
He is. My other problem with all of this is that they sit there and they point to his pitching fits and having temper tantrums while having temper tantrums and pitching fits themselves. Heather Hayek, the reason why I know about this article is because on the Dark Horse podcast, they opened with Heather Hayek pinpointing that moment in the article where she stopped reading, which is the thing about the fantasy, the rich fantasy. And she stops and she went off. And she basically gave the same answer that you did, that she's not answering the question and not addressing what Rolling actually said.
It's a common strategy among post-structuralists not
Yes.
to answer the question.
So when I heard her say that, I was like, I've got to see this. So I opened it and I started reading it. And I started finding the signs. This is a rhetorical trick. And unfortunately, you, my friend, fell for it because halfway through this podcast, you said, this is a great interview.
It is a great interview.
But
It's fascinating.
it is, but it's a trick.
I'm not saying it's not a trick.
Right.
I'm saying it's a fascinating interview.
Right.
When you get down to the Trump part, it's like, don't mask it. Just come out and say it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Own it. Just admit it.
Yeah.
Because whatever you admit about Trump, I'm going to say, yeah, you're probably right. Sure. You're not wrong. But don't hide it. Don't bury it. And that's what they've done, is they've buried it.
Yeah.
So you don't see it until it's too late.
Until it's too late.
Because they've reeled you in.
Yep. This is the danger of the modern press.
Well, and the worth noting in England is that while the BBC has to be as objective as possible, and by and
press
large they
doesn't.
succeed, the print press,
They do whatever they want.
in fact, they are openly partisan.
Yeah.
Which I kind of admire, that they're not hiding. Unlike someone like Fox News who pretends to be objective.
Yeah.
The British press is like, yeah, we're liberal. Sue us. Or we're really conservative. And they'll say it. They will say it. If you ask them, are you conservative? Yep. Are you advocating for the prime minister? You bet. I love that because it's blatant.
Right.
And so it loses a lot of its power. Because the people who are reading it know they're conservative. They don't pretend it's not. They say, yeah, I read this because it's a conservative paper. As opposed to people who watch Fox News.
Right.
Who say, I watch it because it's fair and balanced. It's really not.
We report, you decide.
No.
No, you've already decided for us, pal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, Butler continues to be a problem for me. Because she'll say something, and you had that moment too when it's like, okay, good for you.
Yeah.
And then part 2, oh, come on.
But here's the thing. Mine was facetious because I knew what was coming.
But it's a reasonable, that for the first
What did
half-
I call it for Kendi? The turn.
The turn.
The turn came.
It's just, it went from so reasonable to just, it missed the point.
Yeah.
I think that's her biggest problem, is to be as intelligent as she is, she often misses the point.
Here's my question. Do we call that intelligence? I don't. Here's my thing.
Oh, God.
Let's take the novel I'm teaching my students now. Now let's do one better.
Ruth Hall.
Let's do The Red Wheelbarrow. Because both of us can quote it verbatim, beginning to end.
Yes.
He says in the opening line, so much depends upon. The opening line tells you everything you need to know about the rest of the poem. Focus. That's what he's telling you. Focus. A red wheelbarrow. Glisten in, how's the line go? Glistening in the water.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater.
With rainwater.
Beside the white chickens.
Yes. That's it. Okay. Very first line. So much depends upon. Focus. My students, after I've taught them to dig and really put the pieces together, they come in. Every semester I have not 1, not 2, but at least 3 or 4 students who say it's about capitalism. And I look at them and say, no.
It's really not.
It's about a wheelbarrow. He tells you in the opening line, look at this red wheelbarrow. And what he does is he not hyphenates, but he heightens the color red throughout the course of the poem.
Yes.
Ezra Pound taught him to do that because that's what Pound was big into when
Imagism.
he and William, imagism. Before, Pound created a whole fucking school of it.
Yes, he did.
And Williams was the best student.
Yep.
It's just a picture.
And then Williams decided to break out on his own and do even better work.
Yeah. And what did Pound do? He went to the university.
Yep.
He went to intellectualism.
Not Williams.
No, and Williams and Stevens blasted him for it, and so did Marianne Moore.
And they should have.
Yeah.
They were right.
Yeah, Auding went after him, too.
Eliot went to the academy, too.
Yeah.
And
that's how Pound ends up there, because he's editing Eliot's stuff, and he's making it deeper and darker and deeper and darker.
Which is beautiful.
Yeah. No. As I've said before, and this is my argument, it's been my argument since grad school, poetry ends with The Wasteland. That's as far as you can take it. You can't take it any further. And what Ginsberg does with Howl is say, okay, if that's as far as we can go, let's play. And so he does, and he dances all over that line.
Yep.
But and there are others that dance all over that line. Maya Angelou in The Caged Bird Sings. There's one poem in there where she dances all over that line. I can't remember what the name of it is. She does. Cummings played with it.
Yes.
Cummings took it out that far. But The Wasteland is the demarcation line. That's as far as you can go. That was their sin. They left nothing for the imagination.
Well, what did Williams say? Williams was so pissed about The Wasteland because Eliot gave poetry back to the professors.
Yeah.
This is why I think it took more courage to be Williams than it did Eliot.
Yeah.
Because Williams refused to give the poetry back.
Yeah.
He always argued the poetry's for the people.
Yeah.
Sandberg too.
So when I look at Butler, when I look at it, and you say, someone's so intelligent. Is she? Because she would probably look at the red wheelbarrow and gender it.
Well, I don't think that makes her unintelligent. I think that makes her narrow.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what happens, and this is a common problem in academia, is that you are forced to narrow your focus so much that no matter what artifact you're looking at, you're only going to see your particular theoretical bent.
Yes.
That's my problem.
Yeah. Well, and I tell my students, my actual degree, my actual master's degree, the length of this title is fucking ridiculous. Modern, regional, American literature from 1880 to 1950. That's my actual degree title.
Mine's a little shorter. Mine's Victorian Poetry and Poetics.
But in order in order to identify that I'm looking at regional literature from 1880 to 1950, you have to go through all those things because there's so many subcategories of American literature.
And this is the problem with
That's
academia.
the problem.
Yeah. And I think, so yeah, I think she's extraordinarily intelligent. I think the problem is that she has, like so many other theorists, narrowed her focus so much that no matter what she looks at, she's going to look at it through that lens.
Yeah.
And it is not the only lens.
No. And it's also the case of, and I think you and I have talked about this before somewhere, either that or I know I've talked about it in the regular podcast. If you determine the answer before you start looking, you're only going to find the answer.
There's my therapist. I was asking him because he's a psychologist, has a PhD in psychology. I asked him what specialization do you have in psychology? What's your focus? He said, I'm a street fighter. I use whatever works.
Sweet.
And that's, I think, unfortunately, where we've gone wrong in the academy is that we no longer use what works when we need it. We hone in on one thing and use it incessantly.
Who was it? Somebody famous was talking about the Renaissance man. They said you can't be a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman anymore.
No.
Oh, it was Ken Jennings. He said you can't be a Renaissance man or a Renaissance woman anymore because there's too much to know. And we have broken it down so much that you can't be, and we call it jack of all trades, right?
Yeah.
But you can't be that anymore.
No. I think you can, but I think we've made it harder. I think institutionally we've made it impossible.
Yeah.
If you read the New Critics, they read and interpreted everything.
Mm-hmm.
In The Well-Wrought Urn by Clint Brooks, he interprets Milton in one chapter and Keats in another. You will never see that now. Because in order to interpret Milton, you have to be a 17th century scholar.
Yeah.
In order to interpret Keats, you have to be a late 18th and early 19th century scholar.
Yeah.
That wasn't the way it was back then. You were a generalist.
Yeah.
And you had to know everything about everything. And I don't know, at what point did we decide we couldn't do that anymore? But I think that was the end of the academy when we became so specialized.
The journals forced that.
Yeah. Well, journals...
Because the journals became so specified.
They did. Journals did it, and job listings did it.
Yeah.
Suddenly it became the thing to say, we want someone who only focuses in this area. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And I think as a community college professor, I don't have to do that, which I'm very grateful.
No.
Which is why I can teach American literature one semester and Brit Lit the next.
Uh-huh.
I mean...
but you've got to be fair, you've got the hours.
I've got the hours.
My problem is I don't... And see, this is, at the community college level, this is where it falls. How many hours do you have? Do you have the hours to do this? I've got the hours to teach American.
Well, or publication.
Yeah.
And that helped me immensely.
Yeah.
Because I published in 19th century American.
Even though you're British Victorian.
Even though I'm British Victorian. I actually know a lot more about 19th century American literature than I tell people.
I know you do.
So I had to learn it.
Yeah.
To write about it. A part of me thinks I know more about 19th century American than I know about 19th century British.
Probably. Well, you know more about 19th century British than I do.
That wasn't your focus.
No, it wasn't.
You were a restoration guy.
Yep.
Restoration's not my focus.
Oh, and then the
Orinoco.
Orinoco, yeah, Orinoco's so good. The Country Wife, which is not Afro Ben. I can never remember his name. What a great play, though. Have you ever read it?
I have.
God, I love that play.
I don't know his name.
The Rover. Now that's Afro Ben.
I don't know the name of the playwright, but I've read it. Goldsmith?
I think so. I'm not 100%.
We can look it up after the
Yeah.
podcast.
And then anything by the Earl of Rochester. God bless Wilmot, man. God, he was awesome.
He was.
And then, you also, which not restoration, but it's more Augustine, but Jonathan Swift,
Yes.
Pope,
Yes. Well,
Big Johnson.
That's the Enlightenment for you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, well, Johnson is one of Shakespeare's contemporaries.
Yeah, but he, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always been under the impression it's not until Shakespeare dies that Johnson starts to gain traction.
Yeah. Yeah, and he gains traction in private theaters because he didn't like the idea of the public theater that
Yeah.
Shakespeare performed in.
Yeah.
Because he was a snob. And Shakespeare was not a snob. Which is why Shakespeare will always be better than Ben Jonson.
The craziest thing, and you and I have talked about this, and we'll end on this. This is what you need to think about, Butler. Shakespeare is held up as the greatest writer ever, and he was an actor.
Yep.
That was his occupation.
Yep.
He wasn't a playwright. He was a fucking actor.
Sounds like Sam Shepard.
Yeah. Not saying, just saying.
Just saying. This is like this.
So- Yeah, so anyway, so the point of this whole exercise was to show a couple of things. Number one, just the absolute absurdity of these intellects, quote unquote intellects, like Judith Butler, and the rhetoric traps that they set
Yes.
for these elite magazines that are only going to be read by liberal elites.
That's right.
And they're traps
Yes.
to continue the narrative. And it goes back to the issue I have with John Oliver and Bill Maher from this weekend. You're talking to the wrong people. If you really want your movement to succeed, you're talking to the wrong people.
They don't want to talk to the people you have to talk to.
I
Is the
know.
problem. I mean, they really don't.
I know.
They really enjoy the echo chamber they inhabit.
Yes, they do.
And in order to talk to the people you're talking about, they have to leave the echo chamber and they have to find another way to communicate, a much better way to communicate.
This is, and I swear to God, this will be the last thing, but this will be a good test, a wonderful test, to visit a coffee shop near a massive Research One university and watch how the university profs who come in to get their coffee treat the baristas. Because if they really believed in their philosophy, they would be the best tippers. They'd be the most patient. If something went wrong, they wouldn't pitch a fit. They'd be the most humble. But we know that is not the case.
No, it's not.
In fact, you probably won't see that many university profs because they'll probably have their TAs getting the fucking coffee.
Yeah, it's a system that has a tendency to isolate.
Yeah. Unlike Guilford Community College profs like ourselves, who come and get our own coffees and tip the fine baristas at this wonderful establishment called 83 Custom Coffee in High Point on Main Street. Named after a truck, by the way. Yeah, so there you go. All right. That's Dr. J. I'm the barber. Peace.
Now it's time for Dr. J.